Welcome to Where Are They Now? We reach into the archives of Lenape, Shawnee, Cherokee, and Seneca High Schools and invite selected alumni to share memories and fill us in on their career paths after commencement. Since Lenape's first graduating class in 1961, Shawnee's in 1972, Cherokee's in 1978, and Seneca's in 2005, over 68,000 individuals have received diplomas from these four schools.
Hello and welcome to Where Are They Now? I'm Mark Sensini, a 1996 graduate of Cherokee High School, and today we'll be talking with a Lenape graduate from the class of 1967. He's currently retired but has a lot to fill us in on since his days at Lenape. So I'd like to welcome Ken May to the show. Ken, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Mark.
Great to have you here with us today. So I'm excited to hear about everything you've been doing since your time at Lenape, but first let's go back and have you fill us in on how you got to Lenape.
Okay, sure. Actually, I was born in Indianapolis, and when I was 3 years old, my family moved to Denver, Colorado. So I started school in Denver, and went to first and second grade in Denver. And then my mom remarried, and she married a man in the Geological Survey, the U.S. Geological Survey. And his job was going out and surveying the Wild West.
Okay.
So in third grade, I went to school in Texas. We moved south in the wintertime and north in the summertime. So I went to third grade in Texas.
Because his job was largely outdoors, right?
Absolutely, entirely outdoors.
Okay.
So I went to third grade in Texas, started fourth grade in Wyoming, finished fourth grade in New Mexico, and then he went with the Department of Housing. It's now
HUD?
HUD, yes.
Okay.
At that time it was called Public Housing.
Okay.
And he had a job in Washington, D.C., and so we moved to Arlington, Virginia. So I went to fifth, sixth, and half of seventh grade in Arlington. And then his office got moved to Philadelphia.
Okay.
So we moved up to Ramblewood, and Ramblewood was just beginning. Driving down here, I was recalling how there wasn't any traffic lights on 73 and Church Road. And if you go there now,
Yeah, I don't know if a lot of our viewers can imagine that. Yes.
And there was nothing on Church Road from Ramblewood to here. Okay. To Lenape. It was wide open spaces and just a scattering of houses. So I started to finish seventh grade in Mount Laurel, but it was a middle school and not a junior high school. I had come from a junior high school, and I liked the freedom of changing classes and having a variety of teachers. So my mother, who was a physical education teacher, was teaching at Cherry Hill High School. Okay. So she arranged for me to go to junior high school in Cherry Hill, and then I went out to Denver for eighth grade. And ninth grade, I'm here at Lenape. Okay. I was a brand new student. I knew absolutely no one at Lenape because I didn't go through the Mount Laurel schools. Sure. So that was an experience that I was accustomed to, having moved around so much. But I was happy to land at Lenape, and I spent all 4 years at Lenape. Okay,
so Indiana, and then Denver, Texas, and then
Wyoming, New Mexico.
And then eventually you end up here.
Virginia, yes.
Here in New Jersey. All right, so 1963, we're at Lenape High School now. Your mom was a teacher here as well?
Yes, she was. She was here for, I think, a year.
Okay.
And she taught girls physical education. Her name was June Peterson, so it's not a May. But I didn't see her very much because my freshman year here at Lenape, they had split sessions.
Right.
The freshmen began fourth period, I believe, and went to 10th period, whereas the upperclassmen started at first and went to, I guess, 7th or 8th. I don't know what they went to. Okay. So I never saw my mom very much. I also had an older brother here.
And you had a younger sister as well that went here?
Yes, I do. I have a sister named Sherry Sabodnik, and she actually has two girls who are currently students at Lenape, Jessica and Ashley Sabodnik. And my younger brother is Eric Peterson, and he graduated from Lenape as well.
Definitely a family affair. So let's talk about some of the clubs and activities you were involved in here. You were Future Teachers of America Club.
Yes. Card-carrying member.
Also Camera Club.
Yes.
You did the class play.
Yes, I was the student director for the junior class play, which was Shakespeare's Taming of the Shrew. Okay. And Mrs. Stokes was the director, and she was a special education teacher. My main job was being the script prompter.
Okay.
I was the script prompter for all the rehearsals and all the production, the actual productions. So I got to learn the play pretty well.
I bet.
But it was fun, and she allowed me to do a lot of different things, and but she thought I did a good job. My senior year, the senior year play was typically a musical. And Mr. Hughes, who was an English teacher at Lenape, was the director.
Okay.
And the play we did was Bells Are Ringing.
And you had a role in
for that,
this one,
I was
right?
an actor.
Okay. What was your part?
My part was Francis. I was the sidekick of the detective who was trying to get the star of the play, Vilma Bethel.
Along with the plays, you also did, you were in National Honor Society.
Yes, I was initiated my senior year.
Okay. And you're also involved in starting up a new club at Lenape. Tell me about that.
A couple of friends of mine and I had an interest in Operation Blue Book, which was about Roswell, New Mexico, where supposed aliens landed.
Okay.
Mrs. Noble, who was an English teacher, graciously agreed to start a club for us. So we sat around and talked about what we read.
You talked about Mrs. Stokes and Mr. Hughes.
Yes.
Any other teachers that
Yeah,
had
well,
a
a
big
teacher I want
impact
to give
on
a
you?
special call out to is Mr. Steinmetz. I was in his junior chemistry class, and I actually saw Mr. Steinmetz in September at my 50th high school reunion. Well, the reason he stands out, he was young and vigorous, funny, full of energy, and I know a lot of students really admired him and liked him. And he was the junior class and also the senior class advisor. But the story I have is that when the class was sluggish and wasn't really getting motivated, he would go back to the stock room of chemicals and pull out some potassium and come up, and there was a beaker of water on his desk, and he would drop it into the water, and there was a small explosion. So that was always fun. People really got a kick out of that.
Got everyone back.
Woke us up.
Now, I know one of the biggest memories you had, not necessarily a good one, but one of the biggest memories you had of high school was in the beginning of high school when you first came to Lenape.
Yes, November 22nd, 1963. That's the day that John F. Kennedy was shot and died in Dallas, Texas. And I was in 7th period Latin class with a teacher named Mr. Sherman. And we were doing our Latin exercises, and an announcement came over the public address system. And I believe it was Walter Cronkite's news report of the president being shot in Dallas. And that was very shocking to everyone. And that was very sad. And for the next 3 days, media was only about the assassination and also President Kennedy's funeral.
Sure.
And there was no advertisements. It was all broadcast news. Mm-hmm. And I think most people, like my family, sat around and watched the news and watched Ruby shoot the suspected assassin. And
right.
It was a very sad time.
Yeah, definitely one of those moments people, say they remember where they were when they found this out, and that's definitely one of those moments.
Yeah, my grandfather was quite a bit older than, well, my mom was the last of like 8 children, and she was born when her mother was like 45. And so my grandfather was a student at City College in New York City when McKinley was shot. And he would record and would tell the stories about how he heard that McKinley was shot.
Sure.
In 1898 or something like that.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yes.
All right, so you finish up at Lenape, you graduate.
Yes.
And you go off to college at University of Colorado. Tell us about
in
that.
Boulder. I was very interested in international affairs, and I had applied and actually was accepted at American University in Washington, D.C. But as it turned out, I went to the University of Colorado in Boulder, as he's just mentioned. And the reason for that is my dad was a resident of Denver, Colorado, since 1954. So I got in-state tuition status, which helped. And my older brother was a student there. He subsequently got 4 college degrees, believe it or not.
Wow.
A bachelor's, a master's, master business administration, and a PhD. So he was there for a long time. But I got a degree in political science. I was very interested in history, but I couldn't major in history because my brother was majoring in history.
Okay.
So I couldn't major in what he was majoring in. So I actually completed all my requirements by the end of my junior year. So my senior year, I just took pretty much just electives.
Okay.
Things that interest me, and that was primarily geography and philosophy.
All right. So then you graduate there?
My thoughts were about going to law school, and I was accepted at a couple of law schools. But that period of my life, the big issue was the Vietnam War. And from my perspective was how to keep myself out of the Vietnam War. Although during college, I was in Naval ROTC, Reserve Officer Training Corps. So I didn't go to a law school. I spent a year out of school after trying to immigrate to Canada. But then when I did go back to school, I went to the University of Wisconsin in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. And I got a Master of Arts in Teaching.
Okay. So you go to University of Wisconsin.
Yes.
You get your Master's of Arts in Teaching. And are you finished then? You're going to go out and start teaching? Or?
Going to go out and teaching. And one of the reasons I chose that school is I spent 5 summers working at a resort in Wisconsin. I met a bunch of fellows who I really enjoyed being with, and they were all going to Eau Claire. So that's one of the reasons I went to Eau Claire. Another reason, because they had an intern teaching position, which actually paid for the student teaching.
Okay.
All teachers have to spend a semester teaching, and there I went to South St. Paul, Minnesota, to teach 3 classes of junior class history, U.S. history.
But you're not done with your own schooling yet, right?
Well, I got my teaching credential in Minnesota, obviously.
Right.
Then I decided that I would move to California. And so I moved out to California. I did some odd jobs like working in a cotton gin, 72 hours a week during the cotton season. Then I got a California credential, teaching credential, and I lived out in the San Joaquin Valley, outside of Fresno, about 60 miles outside of Fresno. And being the only credentialed teacher in the district, they had to hire me as the substitute teacher.
Okay.
All the other teachers came from Fresno because a lot of people didn't want to live that far away from the urban area. So I taught there for a couple months, and then I went into Fresno, and I got a job with the Fresno County Department of Health in the Youth Health Services. And there I was involved in arranging well baby clinics where children, and also California passed a law that to start school, all children had to have immunization records. So the county provided those through something like 18 different well child clinics, and parents would bring the children and have them immunized so they could begin school. I did that, and then after that, I became a bus driver for Fresno Transit, keeping in mind that I was always looking to keep the cash flow coming in. And I did that for about a year. One eventful thing happened when I was driving a bus is that my bus was shot at. And it was shot at, bullet hit the bus. And this was on the west side of Fresno, which is a kind of a poverty area of Fresno.
Okay.
And I called in the incident over the bus radio. And apparently the news media, Fresno is a slow news town, and when anything happens, the news media gets right on top of it.
Right away.
So before I knew it, there was 3 news vans at the bus trying to interview me for the event of what happened when the bus was shot at. No one got injured.
That's good.
No one really knew where the bullet came from. Someone could have just been playing around and shot a rifle off. But it was scary.
I bet.
And I had my 20 seconds of fame on the local news.
You were on the news that night.
Yes, I was. People would come up and say, "Hey, I saw you on the news."
That's funny. And you have an interesting story to tell about it now, too. So.
Yes.
Fortunately, nothing bad happened with that. So you're a social science teacher. You've taught in Minnesota, California, New Jersey. What are some of the...
Well, after the bus driving, I got a job at a high school in that community.
Okay.
It's called West Fresno. And I taught 11th grade American history and 12th grade American government at an all-black high school. Fresno was under a Supreme Court desegregation order, and they were trying to make it a magnet school, offering different programs. That was very interesting, and that was fun. really enjoy the kids. Actually, I did that before I drove the bus.
Okay.
Because when I was driving the bus, my same students got on the bus, and the first response was, "Mr. May, what are you doing?"
And then you eventually do some teaching in New Jersey as well, right?
Yes.
That's more
the
North
family
Jersey?
moved from California to New Jersey. We lived in East Brunswick.
Okay.
And there I got a permanent substitute position in Monroe Township, Jamesburg.
Okay.
And there I did primarily, I was primarily at the high school. Permanent substitute is when the teacher goes in every day. You don't wait for the phone call to come
Right.
in. But occasionally they sent me to the elementary schools. And that was a lot of fun, teaching the younger kids.
Had you ever done that before?
No, I hadn't.
Quite a bit different from high school, I would imagine.
It is. I enjoy teaching, and I didn't want to sit in an office 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. And a teacher, you become really a boss on day one.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have bosses to report to, and you have a lot of control and flexibility with your classroom. And I just really like young people.
Excellent. So when you finish teaching, then you go into the insurance field.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
When I was looking for getting into private industry, I went to some recruiters and job placement services in Manhattan. But I did get a job as a special agent for a company called Hartford Steam Boiler. They wrote boiler and machinery insurance coverage as well as doing inspection services. And then after being a special agent calls on brokers. In my territory was Lower Manhattan. I would call on brokers, insurance brokers, to place more business with my company. Okay. Then I became an insurance underwriter. So I'd taken a class on computers at Middlesex Community College because I was interested in getting involved in computers. Computers were just coming out. I noticed how some real estate agents were using computers to get appraisal values and things like that.
Okay.
So I thought I was interested in computers and technology. So I actually got a job with another insurance company being a business analyst. For those who don't know what a business systems analyst does, because people might be looking for career options, and U.S. News and World Report just recently, a week or two ago, reported that systems analyst is now the _1 occupation based on salary, interesting duties, home life, and work balance. So a business analyst is the middle person between the business users. I was always involved in software.
Okay.
Well, I spent 35 years in this field. That's why I'm spending a lot of time on it. Spent 35 years working on building software systems for the businesses.
Okay.
The first 14 for insurance businesses, and after that, other types of businesses. The business analyst is the middleman between the business users who actually have a need for technological support and the programmers who then write the code to make that, to satisfy that requirement through technology.
So this ended up being the bulk of your working career is what you did.
Absolutely.
And you even went on to teach some business analysis.
Yes, one of my jobs was with a software developer called LBMS. It was an English company that actually marketed a product for methodology for process improvement. Is a way that companies are searching for process improvement, getting the process of developing software down to a science rather than the ability of the particular manager. And the way to do that is creating repeatability. And this company marketed a product they could customize for their own particular way of doing business. What worked for that company could be repeated through an Excel-like a spreadsheet.
Okay.
And there's techniques, technical techniques that will help a business analyst do the job. And some of those techniques are like data modeling, how to model data flowing through the system, or how data is stored within a system. Another one is process modeling, how the flow of the business gets representative. It's much better to design a computer system and have that break in the design phase versus not working when it gets delivered to the customers.
Okay.
It's like a 1 to 100 ratio of cost effectiveness. And so if business analysts use these techniques, they can actually draw maps, well, they called models. They're not physical models. They are models that can be represented on paper by symbols and arrows and lines. And that's what I went around the country teaching business analysts to do.
Very interesting. So let's talk about your family life a little bit.
Okay.
You and your wife, Laura.
Yes.
You have an interesting story about how you guys met. Tell us about that.
Yes, we actually met through an organization called Single Book Lovers. This is a way to meet people through the mail. And for a small fee, you got registered with the company, and they sent you a one-page profile that you filled out about your goals, your experiences, your expectations. And you also wrote a two-liner header. Each month, they would send out to the men the two-liners from women, and to the women, the two-liners from men.
Okay.
So I went through and contacted people who looked interesting, who was in my geographic area.
Okay.
And one of the people I corresponded with was Laura Lenape.
So if you saw a two-liner that you thought was interesting or you liked, you would let the company know, and then
I let the company know, and they then would send me the one-page profile.
Okay.
And then if it looked interesting, I would generate correspondence, which would go to the company at first.
Okay.
So they would keep the confidentiality of the customers.
Right.
And then if the person receiving it wanted to correspond, then the addresses would be exchanged. So I corresponded with my wife-to-be.
And what year was this?
I better get this right. 30th anniversary actually is this year.
Oh, congratulations.
We did our honeymoon in Paris, and we will be going back to Paris in May.
A precursor to online dating,
Before
basically.
online dating, before computers.
Very interesting. And you have two sons?
Yes, I have two sons. I have two boys who I'm quite proud of. I have my oldest son is Kendall. I wanted someone to have my initials, so all my brass engraved knickknacks could be passed on to him, KMM, but he has a different name. His name is Kendall Morgan May.
Okay.
And now he is a teacher. He graduated from the University of Wisconsin in Madison and took a course in the city in Manhattan on teaching English as a second language. Now it is termed English as a new language.
Okay.
And they've kind of changed the nomenclature. But he got a credential to teach English as a new language. And he actually went to Kyrgyzstan, Central Asia,
Wow.
for a year and a half, teaching students there English. He also went to Colombia, South America, for half a year to teach English. He was teaching Chinese students via the internet. He had a long commute. He had to go from his bedroom downstairs to go to work. But he did that for a couple of years. But now he got a job with the city schools of New York, and he teaches in Rockaway. And he's doing quite well. He will be getting his master's in a couple of months in that teaching specialty. Okay. My other son is Richard William May, and he graduated from Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh as an architect. Okay. And now he works for a large infrastructure firm, and his office is on the 56th floor of the Empire State Building.
Oh, wow.
In fact, we visited his office over Christmas, and residents of tenants of the Empire State Building have special priority passes. So we walked by these long, long lines of tourists waiting to get to the top of the Empire State Building, and we got an express trip up to the top.
Fantastic.
Also, one other thing you might be interested in is I was working in the city for a company called Merrill Lynch, a big brokerage company, which is now part of Bank of America. But I was working across the street from the World Trade Center on September 11th, 2001, when the airplanes brought them down. Mm-hmm. When the first plane hit, a coworker told me she was listening to the internet, and was said that a plane hit the Empire, had hit the World Trade Center. So I ran to the window. I was on the 14th floor of a building across the street. And I looked and I didn't see any plane on the ground. I was wondering, well, where's the plane? If it hit it, it must have bounced off and landed on the street.
You were thinking probably like a
private plane.
A prop plane or something like that.
Yeah, the Empire State Building was hit in the 40s by a prop plane, and that just went in and dropped off.
Sure.
But these jets actually went completely into the buildings. And then the second one hit about 15 minutes later, and the boom was so loud that I actually fell on the floor because it would sound like the whole building was coming down. Actually, when the building next to the building I was working in fell, it was a Solomon Brothers building. When that fell, it blasted all the windows in the building I was in. Luckily, we were out by that time. But they closed the office and we were all scattered. I caught the last train out of the downtown area of New York.
You were sprinting to get on that train,
I was sprinting to get on, and the conductor had opened the gate and was just yelling to people, get on, get on, get on. So we got on, went to the Port Authority. I was taking a bus back to, I currently live in Ringwood. I don't know if I mentioned that. Ringwood, New Jersey is at the very top of the state of New Jersey. It's Passaic County, close to Oakland, Wayne, Moorestown.
Okay.
I stood in line when we heard that the Pentagon had been hit by another aircraft, and they announced that no buses were running. They had closed all the tunnels and bridges to Manhattan after the public got kicked out of the Port Authority building. I went to Times Square and was watching the gigantic TV screens they have in Times Square. Found out that they had that after a couple hours, they said they were running ferries across the Hudson.
Well, obviously a tremendously sad experience, but we're glad that, especially being so close, that you were able to make it out, make it home safe. And you said your family was driving around for hours trying to get to you that day.
Yeah, it was 12 hours. It was a little bit over 12 hours from the time the aircraft hit the World Trade Center to the time I got home. I actually took the ferry across, and I wanted to get a bus or a train that would get me closer to home. But they said, well, go up to Fort Lee, and you can get a bus. So I took a bus up to Fort Lee, and there were no buses coming across the George Washington Bridge. There's a big bus depot. It was not a depot, but a stop at the New Jersey side of the George Washington Bridge.
Right.
But no buses were coming because the bridge wasn't open. So I called my wife, and it's typically a 30-minute trip from my house to Fort Lee. I took her and the boys 2.5 hours to get there. There were a lot of roadblocks. There were a lot of checkpoints. So that was a terrible time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're glad you are able to get through that. And you're now currently retired, right?
Yes.
Enjoying your some free time to yourself? You and your wife like to travel?
Yes, we do.
What are some of your favorite places that you've been?
Recently, we just a couple months ago, we spent a week in Belgium and a week in Netherlands. Amsterdam is really nice, but they have my wallet in Amsterdam.
Oh.
I got pickpocketed, and it was foolish me, but that's something to remember. And we spent 3 weeks in Spain a year before, traveling all around Spain. Beautiful. As I said, we did our honeymoon in Paris, and we drove around France and also went to Switzerland. We did a week in Italy. We did, with the boys, we took them to Great Britain for 2 weeks and kind of circumnavigated Wales and England and the southern part of Scotland. Also did 2 weeks in Ireland and drove completely around the island, circumnavigated the island. So we're checking off the countries.
Right.
My son Richard did learning abroad in Prague, the Czech Republic, and my other son Kendo was done teaching in Kyrgyzstan, so he was traveling around Europe. So one Christmas, we met up with them in Prague and spent Christmas in Prague and New Year's in Vienna.
Very neat. How was that?
So, that was wonderful. Very nice, very snowy, very cold.
Yeah.
But they really celebrate.
So besides traveling, what else do you like to do?
I like to do photography. Obviously, I've been taking pictures since the 3rd grade, from a little box camera to a 35mm camera. to taking slides. Of course, now the smartphone is just a wonderful camera.
Makes it very easy. Huh?
And videos on thousands of slides, thousands of hours of video. And I like photography. I'm very interested in history. We've camped. We have a camper trailer. It's a little trailer you pull behind your car. When you get to the campsite, you crank it up,
right,
and the top goes up, and you pull out the beds.
Okay.
While the boys were growing up, we did a lot of camping in the United States. I have done a lot of traveling in Canada. I love Canada. Been traveling out to Vancouver Island, Victoria, Seattle, the Pacific Northwest. I was trying to take my wife to places that we might want to retire to.
Okay. Try it out a little bit
I
first.
really love the Pacific Northwest. I love historical places. I like going to, and my wife is an art therapist. I don't know if I mentioned that, but her interest is heavily into art. Okay. So whenever we travel, we go to a lot of art museums.
You talked about your love of photography and history, and that played a big role in your 50th Lenape class reunion.
Last September, late September, we had our 50th class reunion. It was at a hotel in Mount Laurel. And it featured on Friday night a gathering at the Flying W Ranch. On Saturday morning, it involved coming to Lenape and seeing Lenape, and what a fabulous place this facility is.
What was that like? I bet it looked a lot different since the last time you were here.
When I started at Lenape, they were just beginning to build the extension, and that's why we had split sessions my freshman year. My sophomore year, we actually had classes for about a month or so in school buses because the extension didn't get finished in time.
Right.
And then we moved into the new extension, but now that is a very small part of the high school as it is today. The teachers that I had have really prepared me in my life. It was an outstanding faculty. I didn't have any teacher I didn't like, who I didn't think was really dedicated. They prepared me so well for college. When I went to Colorado, University of Colorado, all my classes usually consisted of a midterm, a final, and a paper, and that was it. But my training at Lenape led me to that. It taught me how to write papers. The teachers encouraged people to write, and that was a very, very important skill in my life. The teachers were all first class. I just had fantastic teachers all the way through.
That's terrific. Well, we're definitely glad to hear that. You've had a lot of exciting experiences since leaving Lenape. It's been great talking to you. Thanks so much for joining us today. And we wish you nothing but the best in the future.
It's my pleasure, and I really appreciate the opportunity to come and talk a little bit about my background.
Excellent. It's great having you here. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And that'll do it for this episode of Where Are They Now? For other Lenape District alumni interviews, check us out on youtube.com/Lenape District TV. We'll see you next time.